Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everybody. And it's a little bit of a bittersweet talk today. Sweet because it's glorification of the ever wonderful Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, and a little bitter because reminds me of what we learn from the very beginning of the Krishna book. Just read a few sentences from Srila Prabhupada writes, by Lord Vishnu. And he broadcast it to the demigods for their immediate action. The message was this: the Supreme Personality of Godhead would appear on the earth very soon, remained on the earth of annihilating the demons and establishing the devotees. The demigods should also remain. So that's a section from the Krishna book. I was reminded of that, thinking of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Purity, his loyalty and his dedication to Srila Prabhupada were surely such compelling attributes and fulfilling the mission of Lord Chaitanya for the holy names to be spread. In addition to those same qualities which resulted in a glorious devotional life in ISKCON for Bhakti Charu Maharaj, now live for longer than I guess all of us put together many times over. Also, as stated in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, it's quoted there, Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and he's on that from that statement that Lord Krishna is also today chanting Bhakti Charu Maharaj's name, just as we are, and glorifying his wonderful devotee. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was such, I learnt so much from him actually. He was such an incredible listener. He was so patient, he was so thoughtful and kind-hearted, and actually not just kind-hearted, but extremely soft-hearted. In addition to that, he was very mild and hard for me actually not to qualities of a devotee, all of the 26 qualities of a Vaishnava. Very hard for me not to associate all of those qualities with Bhakti Charu Maharaj. However, whatever about his personal qualities, which were glorious, Maharaj was also ever ready to set those aside in the service of his beloved spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, and of course, his beloved spiritual master's glorious mission, ISKCON. And at all times, when needed, he was ready to show his acumen to the highest degree, even if, in some respects, you could argue that what was required at different points in time were sort of outside his comfort zone, if you like, in terms of those qualities that I've just mentioned. And for me, an example, which was just a year or two, in that sense, 2-3 years before his departure, and that was in Brooklyn, in New York City. Of course, it's no coincidence in many ways that that's where she, in the pastime of Brooklyn a few years back in New York, Maharaj very much exemplified that proverb that Prabhupada would quote sometimes, saying that and the courage of a lion. And I think that was so attributable to Bhakti Charu Maharaj in this particular situation, when he literally led the charge in Brooklyn. We could even possibly use the term Brook Lion. He was so courageous in what he did, because he volunteered to deliver the removal notice to the incumbent at that time in front of all the incumbent supporters. That's literally going into the lion's den, and can be a very challenging situation. As soon as he began to do that, the electricity was promptly switched off, which meant the microphone that Maharaj was using was also switched off. But just as a candle in a windless night, Maharaj remained steadfast and was unaffected by those externals, and remained both fearless and resolute in purpose. And of course, he won the day. Glorious, glorious example. So I, along with all the devotees across the planet today, and not just today, I guess, but certainly today, will ever remember and be ever indebted to the extraordinary contribution that Bhakti Charu Maharaj has made to this world. His lasting legacy will surely be how much we all embrace his example as a perfect Vaishnava gentleman, and his absolute loyalty and dedication and constant service to his Guru and his Guru's mission. On a personal note, for me, Bhakti Charu Maharaj is and will remain my guiding light in life. And I know as long as I can keep sight of him and hang on to his coattails, my life will also be successful, and probably more successful than I could ever have dreamed of. So, thank you for everything, Maharaj. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being such a wonderful guide, and for this lowly soul, such a dear, dear friend who I could always rely on and always call on whenever I was facing challenging times. So really, from the bottom of my heart, Maharaj, I really want to thank you for your sweet, sweet friendship. And yes, I'm missing your Vapu. I'm really, really missing it. How could I not miss that? It's a big wrench, actually, and it's a big hole in, not just mine, I'm sure for many, but I'll speak for myself, a big hole in our lives. Just not to have you there anymore, as I say, in your personal form like that. And, for souls like me who are not so advanced, always exclusively having to rely on your Vani, that's a little more challenging. Your Vapu was just so sweet and so instant, and had such an impact on me right from the very get-go. But still, I'm so grateful to be able to still take shelter in your Vani, and most of all, I'm able to cherish all of the wonderful memories that you so kindly allowed me to be part of. I will never forget those, Maharaj. I thank you so much for them. And I just want to honour you today as best as I possibly can. And I just hope and pray that in the service of Srila Prabhupada and in the service of Lord Krishna, that I will get your personal Vapu association someday in the future. Thanks again, Maharaj. And it's just a wonderful privilege to be able to participate in your memory today. And that really proves your legacy, that there are so many devotees around the world who are constantly Vipralambar Seva, that through separation, the personal association, whenever it may happen in the future, I know will be sweeter than it's ever been in the past. Thank you, Maharaj. All glories to you, all glories to your wonderful service. And I fall at your feet. Hare Krishna. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhush Prabhu, for sharing such a heartful of his great disciples. So, just like Srila Prabhupada was sent by Chaitanya, most powerful. Prabhupada mission was a village. So he need such commanders to fulfill his mission. So, but Maharaj is among one of them. You mentioned about uh, this from Hari Bhakti Vilas that Krishna is saying, whosoever chants, he was incredible listener, kind-hearted, extremely soft-hearted, enthusiastic, and always ready to fulfill the mission of Srila Prabhupada, always dedicated for that. And regarding the leadership of Maharaj, you mentioned that um, uh, you mentioned this incident of Brooklyn Temple, and you told that how the Maharaj has heart soft as a Bengali mother and courage like a lion. So we see that from the Brooklyn incident, and surely we all missing his association, personal association, and his one is the only shelter for all of us. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing. And now we will be hearing from His Grace Panchgauda Prabhu. So I will give a brief introduction about Panchgauda Prabhu. Panchgauda Prabhu is a senior disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He joined in July 1976 at Pantomic Temple. He was distributing Srila Prabhupada books, or he is distributing Srila Prabhupada books since last many years. He developed and managed ISKCON Miami, USA as a president from 1982 to 1990, and from 93 to the year 2000, he was the vice president of ISKCON Vrindavan. ISKCON Vrindavan has grown a lot. Many new projects has been developed in last 10-12 years, and many are in line. So we will be hearing from His Grace Panchagauda Prabhu.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Kaya Shaktam Divine Spiritual Master and the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Spiritual Master and the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the gift of Srila Prabhupada to give us this Bhagavadic knowledge. Bhakti Charu organized
And he met Srila Prabhupada first time in 1973, and he accepted the initiation from His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada on Janmashtami Day in 1977. And since then, Maharaj is uh, offering valuable services to ISKCON in many ways, like the construction of Srila Prabhupada's three main temples in Vrindavan, Mayapur and Bombay. Maharaj donated a lot of fund for that. And when His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj was shooting Abhacharan, so Maharaj, at Maharaj home only, in US. And the 40-member film crew of Abhay Charan stayed in his home, and for a few months they were there. Maharaj is initiating a spiritual master, and his mood is taking on the service of becoming an initiating guru will enable him to perform his service better and will enliven him. So we are very fortunate. Maharaj had very close relationship, friendship with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj as well. So we will be happy to hear from Maharaj. Hare Krishna. So Maharaj, we would like to welcome by loudly one time chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, am I audible properly?
Yes, you are okay. So I will begin. It gives me great pleasure and privilege to speak about His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who is so dear to us. Still, his memory will always remain eternally with us. He was so close, so friendly, and he has helped us in many, many ways in growing in a spiritual community or in a ISKCON community. And it was a great shock when Maharaj left and we heard his news about departing from this world. So I had a lot of privilege of seeing him in Jain and America and many places, particularly in Tobacco Temple at our own home for almost 4 months. But at this, so I would like to describe some of those meetings with myself and Maharaj. So I was told to speak more about the Maharaj's unique contribution, that was Abhay Charan series. So Hema Malini told Maharaj one time that rather than having little clips or making a movie, you should make a whole serial that will go weekly. So he made like 45 episodes. So it was aired for 45 times, and many people, they were standing on the streets and watching Maharaj's like about Srila Prabhupada's Life of Abhay Charan series. So I'm very happy that I could help him in some way or help the whole crew. They were there. So one was Mr. Somya Julu and many devotees that Maharaj would send advertisement for people to participate in the movie. Some of the family members also participated. I had a meeting with Srila Prabhupada, and that was reacted by my brother's children. Like they became Shamik Rishi and Anartha and children, and in this way I was taking prasadam with Maharaj all the time. He's such a wonderful cook. He will always invite such friendly nature. So everything at my home was like as a temple. He will start like with chanting, Bhagavatam class, how to remember verses. And so people were living all over, and Maharaj was in a very jolly mood. He asked me to buy certain few vehicles for him, which I did. But main importantly, that Maharaj's relationship with those devotees, Maharaj's teaching, Maharaj's love to those devotees who were coming to participate in this Abhay Charan series was very, very wonderful. I learned so many things from him, and still it is all in my memory. So I will never forget his unique qualities of loving, friendship, honor to his own God brothers, him seeing equally to everybody. And he met many devotees while they were acting or enacting at our home. And just like Yadunath that I remember, he was at our home, and then he became his disciple also, Maharaj's disciple. And still he is preaching in New York area and other places. So that was Abhay Charan series. So Maharaj will cook himself morning, evening, delicious meals, and he will take all those things for the movie when he is going outside. So these preparations were taken by him. He will direct, not only direction, and he's the not only director, but also he's the producer. But he taught all these people what to say, how to take this. I never saw shooting of the serials or movies. So that is also for me, it was a great learning. But Somya Julu, he will forget, and Maharaj would have to take so many times the episodes again and again to make it is corrected. So in this way, Maharaj made this serial, and then devotees, they were distributed. They were in a package and a nice box, nice container, and that was distributed to many people. Many people bought us. So that is one of these important part was about Abhay Charan series. Then another was that is uh, like unique quality of, he is very inspirational. Also at the same time, he is very entrepreneur. His singing, his bhajans, we still means everybody listens. Particularly, His Holiness. He There was one time. Gurupad, from whom I took my second initiation, he was at our place and in Khargon in Madhya Pradesh. And then he told me that while he was in Vrindavan, in all the streets or in all the even in Vrindavan temple, many people, even the guards and everybody would listen when they were aired the first time, that they were listening to his bhajans. So such a sweet, melodious way that he was singing. And so that is another his contribution. His voice is sweeter than the honey, and he immortalized many of our Acharya prayers. So that is his second contribution to us. That is very important. His bhajans and his renditions of the songs, particularly songs of separation, that he will sing songs of separation from like the gopis have separation, which is given in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tava kathamratam tatta jivanam. So that was, he was singing all the time. Kavi bhiriditam Alma Shapaham Shravana Mangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Purida Jana. So the nectar of your words and the description of your activities are the life and soul. So Maharaj would put those in his own life also, and those suffering of this material world. These narrations transmitted by learned sages eradicate one of the sinful reactions and bestow good fortune upon whoever hears them. So these narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with the spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the message of the Godhead are most beneficent. So Maharaj imbibed that these teachings from Srimad Bhagavatam in his own life, and he dedicated his life for serving Srila Prabhupada. And so he was so dear to Prabhupada that Prabhupada will reveal his innermost things, that he wanted to take parikrama before departing from this world of Govardhan. He wanted to go to Rishikesh, and Maharaj went with him to Rishikesh. And another part, important part that I remember was translation of all this his work that he has done in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many other books, Nectar of Devotion, and translate them into Bengali. So he did translate all of those, taking taking a lot of pain, trouble waking up earlier, and like hardly sleeping for 2.5 hours. So all day, plus taking care of all his movement. So not only that he was a GBC, but also he was a chairman of the GBC. He took this, he put his his aim was to keep the ISKCON intact. Everybody cooperate together. So his main thing that he wanted that his God brothers and everybody, they commit themselves to the service of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada that said that love for me would be shown by how you cooperate together. And he tried himself, not only he tried, but he helped others to cooperate and come to a unique decision on anything to run this movement. And so he did everything for pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. He will say that if Prabhupada was here, what he will like, what he would have done. So we could understand what he would like by so many of his lectures, so many of his letters, so many of his books, so many of his talks. So in this way, so we cannot really, we have no words to provide solace when we are facing this separation from such a glorious Vaishnava, but we can take some comfort in the fact that now His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj is with Srila Prabhupada and he's continuing his service to Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan and Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar. So sometime what is plan of Krishna, it is hard to understand that, but whatever Krishna is doing, we have to accept that it is Krishna's plan, and he's taking his pure duties, and he will go certainly by his so much service, at definitely at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and his Vaikuntha Loka, or wherever he is there in the another universe. So now service and separation that we have, that we hear that from these poems or Gopi Gita and so many other places, that our main aim is service in separation, that we cannot be together. The period of separation evaluated transcendently is more relishable than the actual meeting, which lacks the feeling of increased anticipation, because the lover and the beloved are both are present, so there is no anticipation. But in separation there is anticipation. So whatever instruction, so service can be done by Vani and Vapu. Vapu is means for the body, but Vapu is not there, but we have his instruction, how he led his life. If we continue what he has done and increase it more and more, that is the most important part. So devotees, we should not take his instruction very cheaply. That is the business of the Sahajiyas. And so just as the Radhika went mad at the sight of the Uddhav, so Lord Chaitanya was also obsessed by day and night with the madness of separation. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows himself in his life that how just seeing some mountain, sand dunes, he thought that it is a Govardhan Parvat and he ran towards that. So we also have to do our part of service to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, or our Guru Maharaj, and he's like my Siksha Guru. He's the one who helped me in many ways. And say particularly, I'm like building a temple, and he helped me in that. And he said that I just a day before he left India, I spoke to him on phone, and he says he will definitely come help us in this installation of the deities and opening of the temple, and he will bring all his crew from Ujjain. So I was very consoled and helpful. But I am sure that devotees who are there in Ujjain and other places will certainly help in opening our temple. But another part was, so in separation, in meeting and separation, these two things are there. Since in separation, you have more feeling, more emotions, more bhav, that how Krishna, how to love, that loving feeling is increased more and more and more. That we see in the life of Srimati Radharani, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Maharaj always looked good qualities in everyone. He never criticized anyone, and he initiated a lot of my family members also, Chaitanya, Ishwar, and many others. And so he opened our eyes. Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu say. So to many of his disciples and other devotees, and whatever he said is very thoughtful, very straightforward, and his cooperation is very much appreciated with everyone. And so with Vipralamba Bhav, now what we should do? So that may be the question, that what we should be doing. So doing that, like he started some projects. So if we take care of those different projects, like Ujjain temple, he built within just 9 months. So that temple is running, the food distribution that he did. So that should be continued. And others, and not only continued, but it should be, everything should be increased. Now his temple Ujjain, there is a place called Nagziri. There he is making a lot of like singhassans and deities and fiberglass deities and Prabhupada. Practically all over the world, the people who are getting this Prabhupada murtis and other so many altars and parampara of the deities. So he is parampara, Guru parampara. So that is all, means many important projects. And so his disciples are cooperating together, not only disciples, but it's a vacuum now for everyone. But if we take those services, what he has started, and glorify him, attach to those, then that would be that would be great. That would be service in separation. That will please His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He is a not only visionary, that he saw that how the ISKCON would grow forward, what has to be done. is very inspirational for every one of us. If we read and glorify him or read his uh, about his books, letters, or his life, if we see that how much inspirational he is, and is loved by all over in ISKCON and all over the world is loved, and they are all missing him. And we will continue to miss him. But our main aim is to, yes, to feel vacuum is one thing, but to follow in his footsteps is another thing. So that is what we have to we have to do. So when the gopis were crying in separation from Krishna, that is a greater happiness than meeting Krishna. This is the Krishna, our philosophy, and that how we could serve. So that is the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descendants, our line of God realization is that separation, feeling up. So we should feel, yes, we are separated, that is fine. But if we continue and remember him more and more and engage in his loving service, so we should not say that Krishna is in my hand. Better than worship by direct meeting. So that is the Vipralamba Seva. So just like in meeting Vipralamba Seva, so there is one passage, O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. This is the perfectional stage of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and eating the fruit of love of Godhead is exhibited by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One should not artificially imitate this stage, but if one is serious and sincerely follows the regulative principles and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, the time will come when these symptoms will appear, tears will fill his eyes, he will be unable to chant distinctly the Maha Mantra, and his heart will throb in ecstasy. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system that one should not imitate this, but a devotee should long for the day to come when such symptoms of trance will automatically appear in the body. So this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the same thing that we should feel separation, and so that is one thing, and we should long at how much service I could do to please. Just like we have a relationship with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and how to please him, that would be our Sambandha Avideya, would be how to act, what to act, that to fulfill his all the desires, fulfill his all the and to increase it more and more. What services he started should be done more and more. Like recently he had a place in Deland, and he was so much like feeling that their devotees are alone there, and I should not just sit myself comfortably, Jain, or let me go to see my disciples and help them. So with that mood he came, but somehow by Krishna's arrangement, he got hold of this COVID, and then he left all of us. But now that separation, it's almost a year has gone by, and so naturally the time period has gone. That is true, but we should become more and more mature. And that happens like somebody who has taken a birth has to go. That is very much true. But we have to take care of whatever work that he has left for us. So Maharaj's most cherished instruction that he took from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate together after I am gone. And same thing is continues now also, that in Maharaj's absence we are all reminded to take the instruction to our heart and reform our dedication to ISKCON and to each other. So now, as a servant of the Maharaj, we just again that we are here to assist all of you and all in whatever way possible to for his disciples, and it was very important to Maharaj that we cooperate as a family in the Prabhupada service, and we remind, and it is reminded again today, that although Maharaj is no longer physically present, we are all you are all protected by the shelter of the many devotees who have ready to offer you the support you may require at this time. and also in the future. So I will end here. Thank you so much that you have given me opportunity to speak about His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who is so dear to me, and we are feeling a great vacuum, and it's a very heartfelt that this has happened, and there are many memories are sitting, and this loss cannot be repaired, but just by following his service, then that loss could be somehow it could be covered. Uh, so thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for your valuable association. Your present, your presence reminded so many instructions of Shri Guru Maharaj, and you shared that now. Guru Maharaj, the most cherished instruction of Guru Maharaj, how we cooperate with each other as a family in ISKCON. We are very thankful for reminding this most valuable instruction, and we seek your blessings so that we can apply this instruction and continue to serve in ISKCON. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My obeisances to all the devotees who have attending and who will be listening this. My heartfelt thanks to them for attending, and thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
So you
Hare
can
Krishna.
continue.
So, yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. So we'll continue our session. Our next speaker is His Grace Shruta Kirti Prabhu. But due to some technical issues, we will not able to continue on this Zoom ID. So I'm sharing you the link for Facebook. So we will have this session continued on Facebook. So all the devotees can join Facebook. I'm just sharing the link. But tomorrow we will continue with on the Zoom only. I'm just sharing the link.
Recording stopped.
It will be the same link, Bhakti Charu Swami Facebook page and SPT, GBC SPT Facebook page. Just I am sharing the link. Yes, devotees can move to this link. Our session will continue there. Hare Krishna. We will continuing with our next speaker. Our next speaker is His Grace Shruti Kirti Prabhu. I will give a brief introduction about Prabhuji, and we have 5 speakers today. So second is Shruti Kirti Prabhu. So everybody knows Shruti Kirti Prabhu. He joined in early days of Hare Krishna explosion. Soon he was the secretary of Srila Prabhupada, and he would travel with Srila Prabhupada to various countries. He noted the details of his travels, and thus he is one of the greatest speakers on Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. Yeah, Prabhuji has compiled a lot of books on pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. He has been widely preaching everywhere in the world, fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's mission. He is based in United Kingdom. So we will hear the remembrances and service in separation by Shruti Kirti Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvisesa Sanjivati Paspita Desatani. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj Ki Jai. So, of course, I first met Maharaj in probably 1977 right here, Krishna Balaram Mandir. At the time I was temple president in Hawaii, and I came the end of August, and I stayed for I'm sure, as you're going to hear again and again as people talk, he was such a gentleman, such a gentle soul, and very humble. He had so many qualities that I appreciated in Srila Prabhupada. Anyway, he was very kind to me, and he had no problem in having me help him engage in service and different things, and cooking, like that. And then, of course, Prabhupada left shortly after that. I went back to Hawaii, and just to give some background, I was in Hawaii till 1980, then I was in Los Angeles till like 1983. And then by 1984, I had a wife and 3 children, so I wound up moving back to my home area. Had to get a place to rent, had to get a job. So it was at that time when I was outside of the protection of ISKCON, more or less. I was an hour away from any temple. And of course that lifestyle, having a full-time job, going every day, not being near a temple, you find yourself gradually drying up. And the internet was, of course, just starting to boom by the late 80s, into the 90s. We were all on what was called AOL, America Online. And being on the internet, somehow or other I came across the fact that Prabhupada's centennial was coming in 1996. So it was 1995. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was trying to organize a program to bring all of the, we say, like the disconnected devotees back. You know, all these, my godbrothers, my godsisters, and others who had found themselves in similar situations to me for one reason or another. And he started this program for the centennial that he wanted to somehow reach out to all of his godbrothers, his godsisters, to see that they would be more involved in their devotional service, feel closer to Prabhupada's society, feel closer to Srila Prabhupada. And I don't know about anybody else, but myself, I took it as an opportunity. I was, like I say, for a dozen years, I was pretty distant from the society, just going to the temple on special festival days and things like that. So it was kind of by his influence, by his pushing from afar that I wound up coming to Vrindavan for 1996. And after over a dozen years of not coming to India, not being very involved in the society, that was the first step where I, again, got into more involved in Krishna consciousness. And more than that, it's when I began my writings, which about took 7 years, but later became a book. So that influence was very, very essential, was very important, and it had an effect on me, just getting a taste again. So that was definitely an influence of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And then, of course, after that, I was coming back to Vrindavan. I remember I was here 2000, 2001. Radhanath Swami involved me in one of his programs here during Kartik. We went to Raval. I remember it was the first day of his pilgrimage. They had, like, at that time, 2001, 20 years ago, they had over a dozen buses all filled with the devotees. He had me speak the first day. So, again, just that little bit of taste, it helped so much. And it's something that Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, understood very well. So then we'll fast forward into 2010, between 2010 and 2020, I started probably a half a dozen times I would go to the Atlanta temple, which they would have the Panihati festival, which Jayapataka Maharaj made famous in different places, particularly Atlanta, where he would go to every year at that time. So because I was in the U.S. and temple president, he would invite me to come and speak 1 or 2 days about Srila Prabhupada. So just in the last few years, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, again, seeking Mahiti, he was inviting me to come to Atlanta. And one of the other persons, the big name they would invite was Bhakti Charu Maharaj, because now this time, Jayapataka Maharaj, he wasn't traveling as much. So, since that community has a large Bengali community, so they would invite Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And so I was there for, not the last Panihati, but the 2 before that. I was there for Panihati festival. And 2 years ago, I was there for the Janmashtami festival. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj was there at both of those festivals. And we stayed next door to the temple in the guest house, and I was literally right next to him. We would take prasadam together downstairs, him and whatever Prabhupada disciples were there. We would all have breakfast and lunch together. So it was a very nice atmosphere. And him and I, we always got along very well. I would imagine he got along with everyone very nicely. But we definitely, in some ways, we would speak the same language. He would talk about Srila Prabhupada so much, and in the classes he would talk about Prabhupada. Then I would get up and talk about Prabhupada, tell different pastimes and things. And I remember each time after the class, he would come up to me and he said the exact same thing each time. He'd say, that was amazing. He said, that was wonderful. He said, this class, he said, is so nice. So in that way, it was very encouraging. But he was also, just to hear about Prabhupada, he would become so inspired wherever it was coming from. We know his book has become one of the very sought-after books, how he talks about his own feelings, his emotions, and his service to Srila Prabhupada. And so as I mentioned, 1996, he kind of brought me in. And it started a very wonderful thing where more and more I became engaged in service. So one day as we were waiting for lunch to be served, and he was sitting at the head of the table, Panchagoda Prabhu was there, Teja Prakash was there, I was there, one other devotee, all his godbrothers were there. And while we were waiting to be served, he said, I have an idea. And it just coming for now, this 125th anniversary, he realized it was coming, Prabhupada's anniversary of his appearance 125 years ago. And he said, what I want to do, he said, is in the U.S., because now he was going to the U.S. He had that place in Florida, a farm-like community outside Orlando. And he said, I want to have a program, he said, for my godbrothers and godsisters. He said, I want them all to come. He said, I want everybody to be invited. He said, we have to figure out where to do it. He said, we can all get together for a week or so. And again, give everybody the opportunity just to engage in service and somehow reconnect. He said, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, however long they may be away, he said, let's get them here. He said, it will pay all the expenses. He said, it's going to cost a few $100,000. He said, we'll have to get a nice retreat area, pay for everybody's flight, pay for their rooms, pay for the prasadam, everything. He said, I'll seed it. He said, I'll start it with $100,000. He said, towards this program. So he said, let's all keep in touch. He said, and we should get this going. So this is what I saw again and again with Bhakti Charu Maharaj, is his appreciation, his desire to see that all of Prabhupada's followers, particularly his godbrothers and godsisters, that somehow or other we appreciate them, give them the opportunity to do some service, whatever the situation was. And again, what I always saw was this was the way Prabhupada was. I was with Srila Prabhupada for more than 2 years. It's all Prabhupada ever saw was the service we were doing. If he saw there were difficulties, of course he would correct it. Like in the class, not the other day, but a week or so ago, I was saying, Prabhupada called me into his room during that time 12 times, saying, where is everyone? Where are the others? And they'd be taking rest. So it wasn't that Prabhupada never corrected or never chastised, but whenever he saw that anyone was starting to drift away, he would bring them back in. So this is the quality. This is a Vaishnava. And this is what I saw with Maharaj, is he had that same, didn't see any faults in others. He just saw, these are Prabhupads. These are Prabhupada's people. They're my brothers, my sisters. And he would want to engage them in service. So, somehow or other, as we all do, just like Prabhupada, back in 1977, he left us, but of course never left, as he said, the devotee, he never dies, he lives in his instructions. So Prabhupada gave us so many instructions, and I could see that Maharaj, he took to Prabhupada's instructions very, very sincerely, very purely. And as I appreciated, of course, he had the same, like Prabhupada, he was an aristocratic man, Maharaj. He came from a very nice family, and he had those wonderful qualities. He was very compassionate. He spoke very nicely, and you would have this natural attraction towards such a person as a great Vaishnava. His going, of course, is, as any devotee when they leave, any very wonderful devotee, it's always very difficult. But they leave behind their legacy, and they leave behind their example. So that example of Maharaj for me is something that is very important, very enlivening, encouraging, and just on a personal level, he inspired me so much by his desire to always serve the devotees. Not that we just take service. This isn't our thing, accepting service. Prabhupada said you have to give back. There's something, of course, I I always saw with Prabhupada. Not that we're eager that people service, but we want to give service to others. So he exemplified that very much in everything he did. And over the years, he became more and more dynamic, I think, within our ISKCON society, which makes it all the more difficult for all of us. At the same time, his compassion is there, his blessings are there, the example is there, particularly for his own disciples, of what to aspire for. So this is what a Vaishnava does. Huh? They show you everything. They show you the way. They show you all the intricacies, how to develop Krishna consciousness. And they set the example. As I said, Prabhupada, I was just reading yesterday, Prabhupada was saying, the only thing I've introduced, he said, was translating books. He says that's the one thing. Everything else, he said, I learned as a child. He said, everything I'm showing you, all the examples, everything I'm doing, he said, everything in our society, he said, I was doing from childhood. He said, as my father was.
झूठा मुठा प्यार मन्ने करना नया ता निभाऊंगी मैं साथ तू भी रही नु निभाता झूठा मुठा प्यार मन्ने करना नया ता निभाऊंगी मैं साथ तू भी रही नु निभाता जे तू नाक ना चढ़ावे मन्ने नुवे तू मनावे नाक ना चढ़ावे मन्ने नुवे तू मनावे सारी उम्र में तेरे नाम कर जाऊंगी ले तू हाथ पकड़ माँ बाबू की कदर साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गला भर जाऊंगी तन छोड़ के नाई बे और किते जाऊंगी साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गला भर जाऊंगी होके दूर तेरे ते ना मैं खुश रह पाऊंगी ताने सुने लोगों कि मैं आधी मर जाऊंगी ताने सुने लोगों कि मैं आधी मर जाऊंगी ताने सुने लोगों कि मैं आधी मर जाऊंगी कौन मेरे लाड लटावेगा बिन बात वो प्यार जतावेगा फिर आधी रात ने पीजी आके कौन चिल्लावेगा मेरा नाम चिल्लावेगा हाय मेरा नाम बुलावेगा तू से मेरा पहला पहला प्यार कर लेने पूरा पूरा एतबार। तुझसे मेरा पहला पहला प्यार कर लेने पूरा एतबार। तन्ने छोड़ी बिकित जाऊंगी, ले तू हाथ पकड़ माँ बाबू की कदर, साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गेला भर जाऊंगी। तन्ने छोड़ के नाई बे और किते जाऊंगी, साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गेला भर जाऊंगी। मन्ने वादे जो करे बेसारे वे पुगाऊंगी, तन्ने छोड़ने ते पहला नब दम तोड़ जाऊंगी। जिंद तेरे नाम लिखाऊंगी, ब्याह के तेरे घर में आऊंगी। तेरे माँ बाबू के चरणा में मैं सर न झुकाऊंगी। हाय हाथ लगाऊंगी, सिर न झुकाऊंगी। मेरे पे शक ना कर जाइए, नाक ना फेरते चढ़ाइए। मेरे पे शक ना कर जाइए, नाक ना फिरते चढ़ाइए। ना तो जिंदगी में मर जाऊंगी,
तेरे तक दूर हूं मैं, यो दिल मेरा भी ना चाहता। तेरे तक दूर हूं मैं, यो दिल मेरा भी ना चाहता। बात साथ फिर कि ना है, तेरा मेरा साथ जन्मा का नाता। बात साथ फिर कि ना है, तेरा मेरा साथ जन्मा का नाता।
ले तू हाथ पकड़ माँ बाबू की कदर, साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गेला भर जाऊंगी। तन्ने छोड़ के नाई बे और किते जाऊंगी, साथ फेरे मैं तेरी गेला भर जाऊंगी।
तो आए रिफ्रेश करी कोलगेट मैक्स फ्रेश। শত মুখ তো শত কথা, নিজের কনফিডেন্সের সাথে জবাব দে। নতুন দিন আজ, নিজের সংকল্পকে রিফ্রেশ কর। এই নে কোলগেট ম্যাক্স ফ্রেশ, এর মিন্টি কুলিং ক্রিস্টালস তোকে রিফ্রেশ করে দেবে। ডোন্ট ওয়ারি অ্যাবাউট বিগত কাল, জিতে নে নতুন ক্ষণ। তো আয় রিফ্রেশ করি কোলগেট ম্যাক্স ফ্রেশ।
जय प्रभु प्रधान, प्रभु प्रधान, प्रभु
Hare Krishna everyone. We want to welcome everyone to today's special remembrance class with His Holiness Radhanath Swami. We want to particularly welcome the beloved disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami from all around the world, particularly ISKCON Ujjain and Sridham Mayapur. So without any further ado, we want to hand it over to His Holiness Radhanath Swami. So Hare Krishna everyone, we want to welcome everyone for today's special remembrance class with His Holiness Radhanath Swami. We want to particularly welcome the beloved disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami from all around the world, particularly ISKCON Ujjain and Sridham Mayapur. So without any further ado, we want to hand it over to His Holiness Radhanath Swami.
Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juthapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam
Sagar Jatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patithanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Charu Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyate Shatarine. Hare Krishna. Today we are gathered together, devotees from all parts of the world, to share our profound love and gratitude to one of the most illustrious, precious gifts that Srila Prabhupada and Sri Sri given us, the association of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Narottam Das Thakur composed the prayer to the departed Vaishnavas. Jaya Nilo Premadana Karuna Prachur. This prayer, where Srila Narottam Das Thakur is weeping, crying in a most spiritually pathetic condition upon the separation from a great devotee of the Lord. in the separation of a great devotee like Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, we are many of us feeling very lost, very empty. But in that emptiness, we are seeking shelter of his association within our heart, seeking shelter we can find in the sweetest way, in the deepest way, the association of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. This is the essential theme of Narottam Das Thakur's beautiful prayer. He cries that he's beating his head against a stone in separation from a Vaishnavas. And Narottam Das Thakur, he lists many of the great devotees who he's feeling separation from, because this is the principle of parampara, that when we serve our spiritual master, when we serve a great Vaishnava, we're actually serving all the great Vaishnavas from the time of Krishna through our parampara. And when we're feeling separation from our beloved gurus, we're actually experiencing separation from all those departed associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because the Guru is representing the divine grace, the mercy of all the previous acharyas. The Guru is giving us the gifts of divine love, the philosophy of the highest liberation on behalf of all the previous acharyas. And whatever we offer to the spiritual master is accepting it on behalf of all the previous acharyas. So yes, in feeling separation at this time from His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, our separation for Srila Prabhupada, our separation for all the previous acharyas, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Lord Chaitanya's associates, they are all accepting that mood of love of separation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu especially emphasized the importance of love in separation, union in separation. For the last 12 years of his life in this world, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tasted the sweetness of this vipralamba bhav, viraha bhav, love and separation. And we read in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that devotees were often very much worried for the Lord because how he was crying and how he was even sometimes apparently depriving his physical body in that separation. But yet, we learn that it was the peak of his ecstasies. When Krishna left Vrindavan, the Brijabasis, the Gopas and the Gopis, how they cried in separation. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami tells that after Lord Sri Krishna went to Mathura with Akrura, and then later went to Dwarka, The gopis and the gopas of Vrindavan, they cried for the rest of their lives. This crying is an emotion. It's an offering of love. At the same time, we know that it's very different from the crying of separation in this material world. The pathetic emotions of losing a loved one physically in this world is very much lamenting over the end of a connection, the end of a relationship. But in Krishna consciousness, we know that we are eternal spirit souls, part and parcel of Krishna, and that the Vaishnavas, our gurus, are Krishna's most beloved representatives, entrusted with Krishna's grace. And at the time of separation, Srila Prabhupada explains it, that for a great Vaishnav, the appearance and the disappearance are the same. A devotee appears in this world to spread Krishna consciousness and really never disappears. It simply enters into Krishna's pastimes according to wherever Krishna wants that devotee to be. Srila Prabhupada emphasized the idea of Vapu and Vani. That Vapu is the physical association with our spiritual masters, with our beloved Vaishnavas. And that Vapu is only for a very short time. And the examples illustrated by the way a devotee lives and the words that that devotee speaks is the true presence. That's the true spirit. And that is never lost. Srila Prabhupada, when he was in his closing pastimes, so many lessons. There's a beautiful story that one of his devotees who was a scientist came to see Srila Prabhupada in his last weeks. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada was so emaciated physically. And the devotee was very broken-hearted to see Srila Prabhupada in that condition, which is natural. But Srila Prabhupada smiled. He said, I have been teaching that we are not these bodies, that we're eternal spirit souls. We're eternal servants of Krishna. And now my body is dwindling, but I am the same. And what Srila Prabhupada was really saying is that the physical body of the spiritual master is a vehicle for his divine presence in our hearts to inspire us to follow the teachings and the example he's given. And when we take shelter of the example and teachings, then the spiritual master lives within our hearts forever. And we can feel that. Still, this crying, this sense of loss is the pastime of the Lord to help us to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the remembrance, the absorption, and the shelter of the Vani, of the words of the spiritual master. And that is where our gurus truly live, personally. Srila Prabhupada, during those last months, was very much teaching the very essence of what he wanted all of his descendants to know. He put everything in his books. He explained that to us. The application of will, he was very much concerned for the future. And therefore, when he was in Vrindavan, he was very much giving direction. And Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was there with him, intimately, personally. He was observing, he was hearing, and having most intimate interactions and discussions with Srila Prabhupada. And each thing that Srila Prabhupada did at that time and all the things he was saying, because it was so close to the imminent end of his earthly pastimes, was so important. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was absorbing. He was emulating. And we see that the things that he witnessed Srila Prabhupada emphasizing would be the very way he served Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnavas and the world throughout the years. He saw how Srila Prabhupada had such love and appreciation for all the devotees who were assisting him. The great, powerful, successful leaders of our society, and the simple devotees who may not have been famous, but who were just trying their very best to serve. He could see and feel Srila Prabhupada's love for all these devotees. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he emulated that. How much does Prabhupada love each devotee? How much does Prabhupada care for each devotee? How much Srila Prabhupada was, even if he didn't agree or was angry with the devotee, was only doing it to uplift that devotee. Srila Prabhupada was the ultimate personification of what we would call devotee care. Srila Prabhupada considered himself to be the servant of everyone. That's the quality of one who loves Krishna. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj took that spirit of Srila Prabhupada so deeply in his life. And that's how he lived. And that is the great legacy for all of us. So many devotees from all over the world have been pouring their hearts with feelings of separation, grief, and gratitude for Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. It is historical and incredible, the powerful effect that he has had in so many people's lives. A common thing that people are speaking in their gratitude and appreciation is how, because Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj had such pure love for Srila Prabhupada. He had so much love for all the devotees. He cared so deeply for all the devotees. Whether the devotees were from a perspective of leadership, where they were big or small, he was so kind, so affectionate. As many are saying, he personified Srila Prabhupada's words that a devotee is a perfect lady or gentleman. Such a culture of devotion. He was a guru for our whole movement. And he treated everyone with so much concern, so much compassion, that whether one was initiated by him or was initiated by someone else, whether one was his disciple or his god brother or god sister, everyone felt the presence of Srila Prabhupada showing love and concern through Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada, he very specifically and purposely brought Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj into his personal inner circle at that time for a reason. Several reasons. One is he saw something so special and so pure in Bhakti Charu Maharaj's heart. He saw a receptivity, a genuine surrender in the heart of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And he saw that in Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he could leave after his departure within his heart lessons to teach the whole world. I will not speak too many historical references or personal exchanges, because in a previous talk I've spoken those things. But a few that are so important for us to appreciate is Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, when he first became a devotee. Within a couple months, he met Srila Prabhupada at Prayag, was on the train with Srila Prabhupada back to Calcutta. And Srila Prabhupada entrusted him with the translation of all of his books into Bengali. What a historical, intimate service that is. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, and so many of our Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures are written in Bengali. Srila Prabhupada translated Bengali and Sanskrit into English for the whole world. And in 1977, his books were being translated in so many various languages throughout the world. But no one was entrusted with Bengali, Srila Prabhupada's personal native language, the native language of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Srila Prabhupada gave this instruction to Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. to translate all of his books into Bengali. The entire Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ishopanishad, the Nectar of Devotion, the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and all other books, Nectar of Devotion. To give a service like that to almost a brand new devotee is a hint of what Srila Prabhupada saw in Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And practically one of the first meetings they ever had, Bhakti Charu Maharaj asked for initiation. And Srila Prabhupada saw how he was so sincerely seeking shelter and what he will do in the future. He said, I will give you on Gaur Purnima. And Srila Prabhupada did something extraordinary. He gave him first and second initiation at the same time. And Srila Prabhupada, he was putting so much of his energy into developing the projects in India. Srila Prabhupada traveled all over the world spreading Krishna consciousness. But toward the last years of his pastimes in this world, he was giving more and more time and energy to India. He was building a temple in Vrindavan. He was building a project in Mayapur. He was talking about the temple of the Vedic planetarium. He had built a beautiful temple in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada asked this new devotee, who he had named Chirchor Gopinath, to be his secretary for all of India. A project where he was recruiting devotees to come from all over the world to help. A project that he was getting money and resources from all over the world to develop. Made him his personal secretary. And a little later in Vrindavan, just about 3 months later, Bhakti Charu Swami was with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada proclaimed that he should take sannyas. Srila Prabhupada had such an affection for Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He loved to be with him. And he brought Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj into his inner circle of personal caretakers. He traveled to Rishikesh with him. He traveled to Bombay with him. And eventually they came to Vrindavan. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was sometimes massaging Srila Prabhupada. He was cooking for Srila Prabhupada, and how Srila Prabhupada loved his cooking. And when Srila Prabhupada loved somebody's cooking, he was tasting their devotion. Srila Prabhupada preferred Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj's cooking to so many others. He personally taught him cooking. So close. And so many times, late at night, during the day, when Srila Prabhupada was all alone with Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada would reveal his mind, reveal his heart, and Bhakti Charu Maharaj would reveal his heart. Such an exchange. Hardly 1% or even a fraction of 1% of all of Srila Prabhupada's disciples all over the world had such an opportunity to be with Srila Prabhupada. And it was all by Srila Prabhupada's own will. He brought him in. He personally decided to give him first and second initiation after a couple months. And then in Vrindavan, when Prabhupada said, I want to give you sannyas, other leaders of the society, knowing the responsibility, the dangers, and the great weight of sannyas, they were discouraging him. That you've only been a devotee a few months, you only got initiated recently. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj just completely surrendered. He knew what they were saying. He believed whatever they were saying. But he said, Srila Prabhupada asked me. So then the leaders, they all went into Srila Prabhupada's room and were expressing their concerns. And Srila Prabhupada chastised them. I want to give this boy sannyas. I see what is in his heart. And all the leaders unanimously came out. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada sees such a purity in yourself. And they all together were there for this wonderful ceremony where Srila Prabhupada gave him the name Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And just after taking sannyas, what did Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj do? He went to the kitchen to cook for Srila Prabhupada. He was menial servant of the servant of the servant. That was his spirit. In his example, we learn that this is what true renunciation is. I'm remembering many years later, this was perhaps in the late 90s, mid 90s. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj came to New Vrindavan. And at that time I was living in India, but I was at New Vrindavan at that time. There was a festival going on. And he came to my room, just a little room. And we took prasad, and then we were both kind of laying on our left sides and talking. And we spoke for many, many hours together. And he was revealing his heart. And his heart was nothing but love for Srila Prabhupada. I was deeply moved, and it opened up my heart. And I expressed to him what I saw was a predicament in my life. I said, Maharaj, this is such an uncomfortable situation that I'm in. When I joined this movement, I had no position, no role really in the hierarchy. I was taking care of cows. Then a little later, I was also a pujari on a remote mountain, not seeing anyone. And whatever I was doing was for Srila Prabhupada as a servant of the servant of the servant, very much down in the ladder of hierarchy. I was just serving those who were serving, who were serving, who were serving. And this is the way I was living throughout Srila Prabhupada's pastimes in this physical world. There was the GBC, and then there was the temple president, and then there was the temple commanders, and then there was the department heads, and I was just under all of them. And then somehow or other, I was always happy doing that. I felt so safe in that way. All those people who I was serving kind of disappeared from the scene. And now I find that I have to be a leader. I never wanted this. And I asked them, really, what should I do? And I remember his reaction. He started to cry, and he was smiling and said, this is the type of leadership that our movement needs. People who don't aspire to be leaders, but they're put in that position by the desire of those who want to follow. And on, and expressed in his own life how all he wanted to do was be the servant of the servant of the servant. But Srila Prabhupada called him in and gave him initiation. Srila Prabhupada called him in and gave him sannyas. Srila Prabhupada called him in to be his intimate associate. And interestingly, over the years, throughout the decades, oftentimes when I meet Bhakti Charu Maharaj, or when he introduces me to others during a class or whatever, he refers to that discussion we had. And in doing so, I feel he's reminding me, because we could so easily get distracted in this world by our roles and by, so many external formalities that may be there. But he was always reminding me of how much he appreciated that I never wanted to be a leader. I just wanted to serve other leaders. And in doing so, and he reminded me so many times of this principle, I really feel Srila Prabhupada was speaking through him to keep me on track, because this is the principle he lived for, and this is the principle of Mahaprabhu's teachings. Gopi Bhartur Kapata Kamalayor Das Anudas. To be the servant of the servant and the servant of the Lord of the Gopis. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he wrote the beautiful book, Ocean of Mercy. Every word of it is a glorification of Srila Prabhupada. He explains his life in a very summarized form, from his childhood, being born in Calcutta, brought up in a simple place in Bangladesh, how when he was just a small boy, his mother, who was so much his life and soul, who taught him so much about Krishna, she passed away, and how that devastated his family. He discusses, it's such an extraordinary book. Please, everyone, especially at this time, if at all possible, carefully read this book. He really put his heart and soul into writing it. Some years ago, he asked me to write an introduction for it, so I read it. But now that I'm reading it the last few days, it has a whole another experience. Because in separation from Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, in my own life, every word that he's speaking, every incident that he's explaining is penetrating so deeply and enlightening my heart. Previously, and I'm explaining my own deficiency, previously when I read this book, it was interesting, it was fascinating, it was instructive. But now when I read it, in his separation, it just melts my heart. I feel in every line he's personally speaking and describing his story to me. And you know, I cry with every page, appreciating the gift of all the beautiful memories I have of him, and appreciating the gift he's given to all of us in this book. He describes his life, how he was searching so much for meaning. And eventually, with a friend, he decided to go to Europe. It was in 1970. He took a boat to Iraq and then traveled overland through Turkey and eventually to Germany. And there he was meeting so many people, and he was having so many experiences. And oftentimes, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, when we would meet years later, of course, he would tell me how he felt so connected as brothers, because at the very same time of the summer of 1970, when he was traveling overland west to find meaning in life, I was traveling east to find meaning in life. And we shared so many experiences, and I don't know, but it's very likely we've met the same people. But while he was in Germany, when he heard somebody speaking in a very condescending way about India, it awakened in his heart something that was there, a deep appreciation for the spiritual culture of India. And he returned to India specifically to find the essence of Dharma. He went to the Himalayas, to Rishikesh, to Devprayag, to Joshimath. He was traveling and meeting so many yogis and so many gurus and so many enlightened beings and so many people of all different sampradayas and sects. He was searching and searching. He was reading books, trying to go deeper and deeper. He was looking for a guru. And he especially describes when he met Anandamayi Ma, he was quite deeply moved by her kindness. And he was open to take initiation from her. But she specifically told him that you're not meant to be here. So he returned to Calcutta. And he was feeling somewhat despondent, but at the same time, that longing was ever growing in his heart. And then the same devotee who, or the same friend who went to Europe with him, I believe his name was Prashun, he came to visit him, and at that time he was an initiated devotee of the name Sarvabhavana Prabhu, initiated by Srila Prabhupada, who had already taken important responsibilities for Srila Prabhupada's movement. And he was telling Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj about Srila Prabhupada and about Krishna consciousness. He went to the temple, and eventually Bhakti Charu Maharaj was given the nectar of devotion. And just by reading the words of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Rupa Goswami, his heart was completely fixed in a spirit of surrender to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. He accepted the path of devotional service. He accepted Prabhupada as his guru. He had a dream where Srila Prabhupada was giving him shelter, and he was surrendering everything to Srila Prabhupada, and he felt so happy. He went to Mayapur, did menial services. And then in Prayag, he met Srila Prabhupada, and then he was giving all these incredible responsibilities. It's interesting, Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was taking Srila Prabhupada's books, all of his books, and translating them into Bengali. And his dear friend, Sarvabhavana Prabhu, perhaps he was the first person to translate Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat from Bengali into English. Such special souls. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, after he took sannyas, he went back into the kitchen to cook for Srila Prabhupada. And the intimacy of the exchanges that he not only had personally with Srila Prabhupada, but that he witnessed between Srila Prabhupada and other great devotees was essentially his entire experience of Krishna consciousness, because he was such a new devotee. And I believe Srila Prabhupada called him in the way he did because he was entrusting Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj with his legacy. He was entrusting within Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, important principles that Srila Prabhupada wanted the future of ISKCON to emulate and understand. When we spoke with Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in so many occasions, or when we read this beautiful book, Ocean of Mercy, about what he heard Prabhupada saying, it's beautiful to see how that is what he gave his life and soul to. Srila Prabhupada, he was very concerned about the future of ISKCON. And Srila Prabhupada personally was explaining to Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj the concept of the GBC and the difficulties the Gaudiya Math had because they did not implement that according to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instruction. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, for all those who know him, for all those that have heard him, I can't imagine anyone who was more emphatic about the importance of the GBC, having a strong GBC, cooperating with the GBC. Why was he so much like that? Because Srila Prabhupada personally revealed his heart in that way to Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Bhakti Charu Maharaj took the order of his Guru Maharaj and all the lessons that he learned from Srila Prabhupada as his life and soul. And he had such innocent and profound faith in Srila Prabhupada's words and Srila Prabhupada's desires. Also, when he was with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan, there was an occasion where Srila Prabhupada spoke so strongly about how wherever there is ISKCON, he should be, it should be stated that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is the founder Acharya. Bhakti Charu Maharaj heard Srila Prabhupada instructing others in this way, and he saw the passion in which Srila Prabhupada was concerned, and he had personal discussions with Srila Prabhupada. And he explains it so beautifully, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, that Srila Prabhupada wanted nothing for himself. Srila Prabhupada accepted that all of his disciples were representatives of his Guru Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada would give so much credit to his disciples. Srila Prabhupada gave all credit to his Guru Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada prayed to Krishna, I'm just your puppet, make me dance. But this idea of the founder Acharya was so important for the future of ISKCON, for the parampara to be intact, and for the unity of our society to be there. And Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj had such beautiful realizations. And throughout his life, he was teaching courses on founder Acharya. He was writing papers on founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and that importance. Srila Prabhupada personally instructed him during those days in Vrindavan about the difference between a true Vaishnava and a Sahajya. The purity of the love of the gopis in Vrindavan, and how so many people in this world, they mistaken it for immorality. The love between Krishna and gopis is the purest love. And how by serving the mission of the Guru Maharaj, of one's Guru, by taking shelter of our devotional service, by hearing, then we're given the qualification to actually understand that. Srila Prabhupada personally nurtured him in our philosophy. What is the difference between Mayavad philosophy, impersonal philosophy, and Vaishnava philosophy? Srila Prabhupada was preparing for his departure in those days, and this was very much a part of his preparation for his departure, to impart these essential principles to a devotee that Srila Prabhupada had personal trust, would understand it appropriately, and share it. with the devotees within our movement. And that is just what Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj has done. What a precious gift Srila Prabhupada gave us in His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. So learned in our philosophy and our teachings, so eloquent as an orator, a speaker, such beautiful, heart-melting, melodious voice when he would sing, such incredible talents when he produced dramas, television series of Hai Charan, such a magnificent cook. He was so empowered in every way, but yet he was completely humble. During those days in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada would meet Brija God brothers, and O.B.L. Kapoor would come to meet Prabhupada sometimes. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj shares an exchange that he had with O.B.L. Kapoor, and he shared the exchanges that Prabhupada would have with him. Where when Srila Prabhupada was living in Allahabad, and he was in his Leela as a householder, O.B.L. Kapoor would visit him. And O.B.L. Kapoor asked Srila Prabhupada, can you give me the medicine that you have, the medicine that will give me Krishna Prema? And Srila Prabhupada, he said, in his humility, he said, I don't have, but I do have the formula in which one gains Krishna Prema. O.B.L. Kapoor said, please tell me. Is it a secret? Please reveal. Srila Prabhupada said, the secret is Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One should be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, eager to give all respect to others and not expect respect for oneself. In this way, one can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. When Srila Prabhupada explained this, he said, I will reveal this secret formula to the whole world. And O.B.L. Kapoor, he just listened. How? But then he told Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, now I see he's actually done it. He's revealing the innermost secrets of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, how to chant the names of God to the whole world. Bhakti Charu Maharaj became very close with many of the leaders of Gaudiya Math. And he witnessed how they were so astounded how our Srila Prabhupada, he left India with nothing on a cargo ship, and now he had 100 temples, thousands of devotees, millions of books being published. It was extraordinary. Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he spoke to Srila Prabhupada, and Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was right there, because they would speak in Bengali. So of all the devotees in ISKCON, hardly any who were around could actually hear. When Srila Prabhupada would speak, to these God brothers and exalted Brijavasis, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was one of the few who could actually enter into the mysteries of their discussions, because he knew Hindi, he knew Bengali. Krishnadas Babaji was praising Srila Prabhupada, that you have done what nobody else could do because you have such complete faith in the chanting of the holy names. Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj would chant the holy names practically throughout the day and night. Param dristva nivartate. He had such a taste for chanting. He hardly ate, he hardly slept, he practically didn't do anything. He was really following in the footsteps of Haridas Thakur. And to do this in a genuine way is impossible for anyone unless they have love for Krishna. And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was there. And yet he was telling Srila Prabhupada that none of the rest of us could do what you are doing because none of us have the same faith that you have in chanting Krishna's holy names. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was listening. He was watching. He was being transformed. He was emulating these principles. Srila Prabhupada entrusted so much in him. And that is one of the reasons why so many of the senior most devotees in our movement are pouring their hearts out in such a way upon his physical disappearance from this world. Such a loss, such a vacuum in our hearts, because everyone in our movement knows that he was specially chosen by Srila Prabhupada. He was specially brought in by Srila Prabhupada's own loving hands into his service. He was given most intimate services and was there during the final 9 months of the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. So for our whole movement, especially for Srila Prabhupada disciples, Bhakti Charu Maharaj has such a special place. And yet, so humble, so genuinely, purely humble, so respectful, so affectionate, so caring, so gentle, so kind. These are truly the symptoms of an exalted person. To be so great, yet to be so humble. To have such a designation as one of Prabhupada's most intimate, loving associates, and yet to be seeing the good in others. To practically see everybody else as better than him. Srila Prabhupada, he would say, the nature of a Vaishnava is he sees everyone as better than me. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he would serve people in that way. Many of the senior devotees of our movement are expressing Srila Bhakti Charu Swami's hospitality. How he was so attentive to every possible detail to make devotees happy. In Calcutta, when we really, at a certain time, we had no access to the ISKCON temple. It was taken out of our movement. He inspired and instructed Chaitanya Das Prabhu and Malini Devi, his Bhakti Charu Maharaj's loving disciples, to open their homes for all the devotees of ISKCON when they came to Calcutta. And they did it. And he would give them such personal, exact instructions of how to serve the devotees. Devotees lived with them. They cooked for devotees, large groups of devotees, individual devotees, arranged for the rides to Mayapur Dham. How he inspired, because he just cared so much. In Mayapur, the way he would receive the Vaishnavas, the way he would care for the Vaishnavas, the prasad he would arrange for the devotees, every detail with such culture, with such sensitivity to try to make everyone happy. That's who Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was. He was self-effulgent as the minister of culture for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Bhakti Charu Maharaj he loved Srila Prabhupada. And because he loves Srila Prabhupada in such a genuine spirit, all of these qualities were manifested in his life. And we have all been nourished by that. So much of what ISKCON is how Srila Prabhupada entrusted his spirit in those who love him. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj is truly extraordinary in this way. And therefore, disciples and followers are feeling intense grief and separation upon his disappearance. But in very much the same way, God brothers and God sisters and disciples of others, initiated, feeling like that because he treated everyone as a representative of Srila Prabhupada's love. He loved Prabhupada so deeply, and he expressed that by how much he cared for the society and the movement that Srila Prabhupada had established, because he knew firsthand what Srila Prabhupada's heart was and forever is. Srila Prabhupada was such a, of course, whenever we say was, we're speaking about the physical sense, but actually it's ever present because Srila Prabhupada's pastimes are something that's eternal. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he is in every way taking shelter and representing Srila Prabhupada's will. Srila Prabhupada is so fearless in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Prabhupada was so grateful during those last months when Bhakti Charu Swami was right at Prabhupada's bedside. He would see how Srila Prabhupada happy with Ganesham for distributing books behind the Iron Curtain. So grateful to Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. Ganesham became Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. He was so grateful and so happy to see how Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj was spreading Krishna consciousness into the science community. And how Srila Prabhupada put so much of his heart into that project. He wanted whatever money, whatever manpower he needed, please give to him, he was telling his leaders. He observed how Srila Prabhupada was so pleased by Harikesh Prabhu translating and printing so many books in so many languages. He was watching Srila Prabhupada, how he interacted with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. And he was appreciating so deeply. He was taking shelter of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj because he saw how Srila Prabhupada was so pleased with him. There are so many examples at Treya Rishi Prabhu, how Bhakti Charu Maharaj was just hearing the exchange between he and Prabhupada, and how Prabhupada was so happy that he was spreading Krishna consciousness in the Middle East. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, when it was announced in India recently that he wanted to go to America, devotees were pleading with him not to go. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, sent by his Krishna Prabhu in London, this video clip of Bhakti Charu Swami speaking, just glorious. There's no question. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was being called by Srila Prabhupada. And he was responding to that call. And nothing and no one could stop him. And interestingly, when Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was taking care of Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said, I'm going to London, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was told by his Ayurvedic doctor that this is very bad. He should not go to London. His health is too vulnerable. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj understood, even though it could be such a crisis in his physical health, there's nothing he could do to stop Srila Prabhupada. Such an example Srila Prabhupada gave. And how every example that Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj saw in Srila Prabhupada, he followed in his footsteps. When Bhakti Charu Maharaj came to America, he was inflicted with this disease of COVID-19. And in his gracious way, which was so much in harmony with his life, he basically entrusted all the decisions in the executive committee of the GBC to decide. And with that faith, completely taking shelter, he was brought to the hospital. From a physical perspective, on this external level, it really does not affect a soul who's completely taking shelter of Krishna. No one can have a doubt that Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, from when he first came to this movement, he totally took shelter of Srila Prabhupada. He surrendered his body, his mind, his life, his soul to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada recognized and fully accepted him. And since Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, in separation, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj has surrendered to everything he learned from Srila Prabhupada and has given his life for that and that only. One who surrenders to Guru and Krishna, Krishna surrenders to that devotee. So there is no question of astrology, there is no question of time, place, or circumstance for one who has surrendered to Krishna. We know that that devotee is perfectly in the shelter of Krishna, perfectly in the shelter of Srila Prabhupada. This departure was a divine arrangement and supremely glorious. Actually, whether Bhakti Charu Maharaj was in Florida or in a hospital room is of very little consequence, because his heart is Vrindavan. He is in the most intimate, sweet, loving embrace of Srila Prabhupada, Sri Sri Radha Madhava. His disappearance on the disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami is something so very special. Sanatana Goswami is the elder brother and guru of Rupa Goswami. He personified the most caring, loving service to all living beings. When he lived in Vrindavan, although the greatest of scholars, the greatest of liberated souls, he was kind to everyone. All the Brajabasis accepted Sanatana Goswami as their guru. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, he personified that quality. And the Ishtadev of Sanatana Goswami, Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, in Ujjain, he established the temple of Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan, his Ishtadev. Perhaps devotees from Ujjain are with us today. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, that entire project was born and nourished by the seed of his love for Srila Prabhupada. Ujjain is one of the 4 places of Kumbh Mela. And it was a place that really ISKCON was doing very little or practically nothing there for all these years. But he wanted to do something very special there. And he saw Srila Prabhupada in his last days in Vrindavan, how he would interact with politicians, political leaders, and how Srila Prabhupada always focused on the first instruction he received from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. That Srila Prabhupada received the instruction to take the message of Lord Chaitanya to the whole world in the English language. And when Srila Prabhupada questioned Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there's so many problems, and India is a subordinate country to the British. First, we need to get independence. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he emphasized that there's really only one problem in this world. We have forgotten our relationship with Krishna. And the only solution to those problems is to revive our relationship with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada had such faith in that principle. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, when he was meeting the political people in Ujjain, when he was meeting the common villagers near Ujjain, he was a friend to all. And from nothing, perhaps the fastest temple that was ever built in ISKCON's history, and one of the most beautiful and glorious temples, with beautiful, glorious deities, was built by his enthusiasm. And while he was building that, still he was traveling the world and making everyone feel that he's their best friend, whether it be in Mayapur, Calcutta, or America, or South Africa, or Europe. In Ujjain, he would love to take devotees to the very place that Krishna and Balaram and Sudama were students of Sandipani Muni. And he felt such a connection there, that this is the place that Krishna actually performed his Leela of being a student to receive knowledge. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj made this temple in Ujjain a place to teach the arts, the sciences, the culture, and the knowledge of Krishna consciousness. So, wherever Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj's followers are, I pray that in this grief, in this pain of separation that we're now feeling, search within that for the gratitude that we have been touched by Krishna and Srila Prabhupada's divine grace in such a special way through His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Along with the suffering and separation, which we should not neglect, we can be very open and feel it. But we are not alone. We are not without. All the moments that we had with Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj with him personally, with those who have been inspired by him, to hearing his recordings, all of the inspiration that we received. Let us be deeply grateful. And in that gratitude, yes, he will live with us. And he will live with us just the way he lived with us when he was physically present, in the sense that this ocean of kindness will be bringing us to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. I personally yearn to follow in his footsteps. Vyavashayatmaka buddhireki hakurunandana. Making the instruction of the spiritual master one's life and soul. And he did it with such grace. He did it with such affection. He did it in such a way that everyone could feel Srila Prabhupada's presence. Bhakti Charu Maharaj is a person of essence. Receive the essence. He's giving the essence. In our gratitude to him, we try to carry on his spirit, his mission, to bring the world to Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet and to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Madhav. And in that spirit, more and more, as time passes, we will all be in the association of Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in a deeper and deeper way. Thakur Bhakti Vinod wrote, "He reasons ill who say that Vaishnavas die, when thou art living still and sound. Vaishnavas die, live, and live to spread the holy name around." His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I spoke in several other of these internet discussions my conviction that during that last week or so of Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj's physical pastimes, there were tens and thousands of devotees praying, crying to Krishna for the association of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. There was such a unified outpour of love for him. Temples all over the world were having special kirtans for him. Through the internet, there were kirtan groups, there were discussion groups. And because of the possible imminence of his disappearance from this world, there was such a feeling of desperation crying out to Krishna for Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And such a magnification of how much he means to each and every one of us. Yes, we were all in the room with him when he left this world. In our hearts, each one, thousands and thousands. Because bhakti is a matter of our devotion. It's not a matter of physical proximity. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, being a puppet in Prabhupada's hands, he lived to bring us all back to Krishna. And he departed to bring us all, in a way, to bring us all back to Krishna. And he will live in our hearts to bring us all back to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. I thank you very much.